Hello everybody, it's Valery from the Easy IELTS, and in the second lesson we're gonna talk about how to write any introduction in 1 minute. So there are different types of the task 1 questions. Sometimes you may get the dynamic charts, or sometimes you may get the static charts, or the process diagrams. So for each of these types of task 1 questions, we're gonna write the introduction. So let's start with the dynamic charts. In this one, you can see the internet users and country, right? Well, the point is that in dynamic, we have the change over time. And if you would look in the x-axis, you can see the continuous changes over time from 2010 to 2025. So the second example is the static charts. And in this one, they just capture the one moment, just a snapshot of the time. So in this case, we talk about the favorite sports among the students in 1 year in 2024. So this is just a snapshot of the data. And the third one is just the process. And here we have the step-by-step diagram. In this case, it looks like this is just the diagram for the production of the burger. So here we have the step-by-step development. This is important. Here we do not have any data. There's no time, just the step-by-step. So let's see in more details the examples of the dynamic charts. Here we have the line chart. The most important part here is just, the time at the x-axis. Here we have the continuous timeline. And this is important because later it's your task to identify which chart you have, because the introduction for either it's dynamic, static, or the diagram, it will be, different. So the next example is of the dynamic chart is the multiple line chart. Here we have the same idea, continuous axis. If you see the continuous axis, there is dynamic chart. The bar chart, the same idea, same years. Area chart, absolutely no change here. It's the same dynamic chart. However, for the static charts, we have a different situations. We have the comparison. We have the snapshot of the data. Here we have the year 2000 and year 2010. And usually, you're asked to give the comparison 1 year versus another one. For the static pie chart, we have the same idea. There is some data for the year 2000, some data for 2010, and you're asked to give the comparison. There is absolutely no difference for the static table, same idea, 2 years, and just give the comparison. For the map charts, absolutely similar situation. We have the year 2010, 2012, and you're asked to provide the comparison. That's important for the static ones. For the diagram, here we have the step-by-step development. In this diagram, it's about how French fries are produced. And here we have step-by-step idea. So right now we're going to write one sentence introduction or one sentence paraphrase for this chart. First of all, we need to identify what is it. Here we have the continuous x-axis, so probably it's dynamic chart. Exactly. And for this one, we're gonna read about the prompt or the task. The graph shows data about the annual earnings of 3 gas stations in Barcelona from 2000 to 2010. So to write the introduction, we need this sentence and we need to take the legend. So we're gonna paraphrase the prompt. We're gonna, use synonyms. From the graph, we're gonna go to the chart. The verb shows. Very important, to look at this verb, because in this case, we're gonna substitute it for tracks the change in or illustrate the change in. This is important verbs to illustrate the dynamic, that this is the dynamic chart. Because for dynamic chart, we have the change over time. And here we have the change, and here we have the change as well. The verb tracks, specifically shows us that this is the, changes over time. Exactly, because the tracks usually used with the time. The verb illustrates, it's more universal verb, but it's of course better than to write just shows, right? Because it's more academic and more advanced. So obviously we have, the earnings to income and, the time frame from 2000 to 2010. We just paraphrase it as a over a 10-year period between. Yeah. So, and this is the final answer. That's it for the dynamic chart. So for the bar chart, first of all, we need to identify, is it dynamic, static, or the process diagram. So here we have the 2 years, year 2000 and year 2010. Probably we have the comparison. Well, that's really obvious. So it's just a static chart because it captures one moment only. So let's try to paraphrase the first sentence. To do that, we need to have the legend as well. So we're going to paraphrase the static chart. That's very important because, everything is relatively similar to the dynamic chart except the verb shows, because in this case, we have the comparison. So we compare one time slot to another one, the year 2000 to year 2010. So we need to use the verb compares, not just shows or illustrate. It compares, it specifically compares. Or we may use the illustrate a comparison of, because this is the static chart and it shows one moment, 2000 versus 2010. So finally, we have the answer. So for the diagram, we have to show that this is the process. In this case, the diagram shows the process of producing French fries. Yeah. So how to write the one sentence introduction? We're going to paraphrase it as well. So we're going to substitute shows to illustrate. Illustrate a more universal verb. However, we're going to add the particle how, because in this case, it's very important to point out that in the diagram, we do not have any data. We do not have any time. We just have the process. So the verb how will show, step-by-step mechanism. And here is the final answer. Sometimes you may get the combination of charts, Probably you might get the dynamic and static all together, so you need to write the introduction for both charts. So how to do that? Let's see. The line graph and bar chart shows the information about annual earnings and gas sales at 3 gas stations in Barcelona between 2000 and 2010. So let's see this chart. So this is the line chart. It's um, right on the left axis. On the right side, you have the static bar chart. So we need to identify what to what category these charts belongs. So line chart probably belongs to dynamic because it have the continuous axis, and the bar chart is static because it has 2 years, year 2000 and 2010, which is basically shows the comparison. So let's see how we could write the introduction for these two charts. We need to paraphrase the prompt. I'll give you two options. The option one, we're gonna use, our verbs, which are the track changes in, which shows that this is the, line chart specifically. It's dynamic line chart. And we're gonna use the word compares that shows that there's a difference. So we just gonna make the comparison, right? And the second option is where we do not really, paraphrase it, but in terms of the verbs, we're just gonna leave show as it was in the prompt, and we're gonna add illustrates. You may do this as well, however, the A option is a little bit more advanced and give you more points. Why is that? Because first of all, you shows the awareness of chart types. You just started your task one, and the examiner will read your task, and he will see that, oh, this person uses the much more advanced academic vocabulary. This person understands the chart types. This person uses precise vocabulary, because tracks, it's about the time. Compares, it's about to show the difference. And of course, in this case, you will get much more points for the lexical resource, because you show yourself off that I know exactly this chart. I know the vocabulary. So let's sum up our information. There's a different verbs for the different categories. In this case, for the dynamic chart, we're gonna use the time and change. We're gonna use the verbs tracks and illustrates. For the static, we're gonna show the comparison. So we use the compares or illustrates a comparison of. And for the process, we're just gonna, use your universal verb illustrates, but add this particle how to show the sequence of events. So what did you learn today? Today you learned two things. The first one, there's only three types of graphs and we need to identify it. And if you want to get the better grade, the higher points for the lexical reserves or the grammatical range, it's, better to use the correct verb for each category. Guys, there's only three categories: dynamic, static, and, diagram. So just, that's it. So, and this is your homework challenge. If you really want to do it, just, go to the comments and write one sentence introduction for the challenge number one. Well, you need to identify what type this graph is and write your answer. Well, for the challenge number two, this is the same idea, just identify the task and write one sentence paraphrase. And challenge number three, the same point, just write one sentence paraphrase. And I'll see you in the next lesson, because in the next lesson, we're going to talk about the paragraph 2, which is our overview of the main trends. We're going to complete it in 2 minutes. I'll see you in next lesson. See you.